What problems are troubling you? What's frustrating you, bothering you, worrying you? Want solutions? Want answers? Welcome to Here We Come to Save the Day, hosted by David Adelson. This podcast is dedicated to solving everyday and global problems in an uplifting, fun, enjoyable way. There is a solution to whatever's troubling you. Ask your questions, and we'll do our best to give you practical, useful, workable solutions you can use starting today. Join us now with David's special guest experts who will share their own experiences, life lessons, and practical strategies for creating the life you long for. Start living your best life today, right now, with David Adelson and friends.
Hi, this is David Adelson. Welcome to another exciting and hopefully fun and delightful episode of Here We Come to Save the Day. Today we're going to be talking with Dr. Rhoberta Shaler about ending toxic relationships and empowering yourself if you're in a relationship that maybe doesn't help bring out the best in you. So I'm very excited to have you here. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I always like talking about this topic so that people can put an end to their distress.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know they have an option. So it's one of the reasons I like supporting what you're doing. Just a heads up that Here We Come to Save the Day is sponsored by Peace and Harmony CO, peaceandharmonycompany.com. And right now we have programs that you can purchase that will bring peace and harmony to your family, to your business, to your apartment building, to your neighborhood, to your city, community, whatever level you want. And we encourage people to check it out at peaceandharmonyco.com and take advantage of what's there. There's even some samples that you can try. And yeah, I think that's enough for now. Let's just begin. So I'm going to read your little bio here. So, Rhoberta Shaler, PhD, the relationship help doctor, provides urgent and ongoing care for relationships in crisis. Her mission is to provide the insights, information, and inspiration for clients and audiences to transform relationships with themselves and other humans to be honest, respectful, and safe in all ways. Even the United States Marines have sought her help. Dr. Shaler focuses on helping the partners, exes, and adult children of the relentlessly difficult toxic people she calls hijackals to stop the crazy making and save their sanity. Author of 16 books, including Escaping the Hijackal, including Escaping the Hijackal Trap and Stop That's Crazy Making. She hosts the internationally popular podcast, Save Your Sanity, Help for Toxic Relationships. Her YouTube channel for relationship help has reached over 385,000 views. Wow. So you've been busy, which I knew. So, and I just want to say that I can't help but think that even without you saying anything, but your gentle presence in a room would settle things down, because I think people would be embarrassed to be crazy around your sanity. So, which I've loved since I first saw you and met you. So welcome. Where do you want to start? Let's let you lead.
Well, I think the most important thing that I can contribute, David, is to help people recognize if they're actually in a toxic relationship, which is different than going through a difficult patch. A toxic relationship is continuously running into difficult patches around the same topics and the same situations. And it's very important for us to realize that whether we're looking back and seeing that perhaps our parents were toxic, if so, they're going to set us up to find a toxic partnership. And if we're with a toxic person, that we're maybe really thinking that if we just love them enough that they will magically change, and they won't.
That, yeah, boy, that brings up some stuff. I had I don't want to do that. All right. Well, there are so many things that I can see that can come up with people. And let's start with the person who is in the toxic relationship, who feels there are several things. One, they think that if they love them enough, they'll change. Two, they feel that they need to adjust themselves to match the behavior so they'll stop getting criticized and all of that. And three, feeling like this is what they deserve. Are these some of the key things that come up in your work?
Well, certainly. I mean, if you are not a toxic person, you may have healthy boundaries. And once you see a toxic person, you're going to say, mm-mm. But if you happen to be of the good person variety that thinks, oh, this person's had a rough childhood. Oh, this person's going through a bad patch. So you excuse their behaviors over and over and over again. And then you may have in your mind that, oh, they've just never felt fully loved. So if I just love them, if I don't push them, if I don't nag them, if I'm more patient, less demanding, if I make myself into a pretzel or maybe even worse, a doormat, then they'll feel loved. And when they do that, they'll magically relax and turn into the person I met and fell in love with. And the thing we have to know, David, that person that you met and fell in love with, if they're a toxic person, that was a chameleon act for your benefit. That person's not coming back. That person is a show to get you where they want you. The real person is the one that you're having all the difficulty with. So it's time to calibrate that. Is it happening all the time? Is this person always needing to win in every conversation? Are they continually finding fault with me? Is it that everything is my fault? It's blamed on me when things go wrong. It's never a situation where they hold themselves accountable or responsible for anything. You know, these kind of things, when you start seeing the patterns, that's when the penny can drop and you can say, whoa, no amount of pouring love into this bucket is going to fill this bucket.
So I get that. There's a bunch that we'll come back to, but one of the things that I come back to is the person to empower themselves or to love themselves enough to recognize that I don't need to please this other person, that I'm whole within myself. And if they want to be that way, I don't need to put up with it when they're being that way. But
I don't need to put up with it at all, because it's going to recur and it's going to recur and you can't change it. And why would you settle for that? You know, and if you have children, why would you allow them to see this model?
Okay, that makes sense. So when someone comes, I know you work individually with people as well as all the work that you do with your books and your podcast and YouTube channel. What's the first steps that you recommend someone take?
Well, very important is to recognize the patterns, the cycles, the behaviors that are continuously showing up, and to see them for what they are. Like, they exist. You can make a list of them. And when you see them and say, oh, yes, that's there, that recurs. Oh, I always feel like that. Then you start going from episode to episode and you start stepping back and seeing the pattern. Everybody, keep your compassion hat in your hand. Do not put it on at this moment. I'm just going to say that if you think that, oh, this is sad, and oh, this person has had a rough time, they have, but you didn't give them the rough time. You didn't create the sadness. You don't have the ability to change it. So it's very important for you to see that this person is how this person is. And if they are treating you poorly in any way on a regular basis, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, you need to recognize it.
There was a I think it was a New Yorker cartoon I saw a while back, which is two people are meeting in a bar or something, a man and a woman, and one of them says to the other, and I don't remember which, my guess would be it's the woman says to the man, so what are you doing to undo all the things that you learned before you met me so that we could possibly have a good relationship? Something, I mean, I'm messing it up, but this basic idea that the recognition that everybody has something, and that's not what we want to bring to the relationship. What we want to bring to the relationship is our best all the time. I think a lot of people feel that, I think a lot of people feel that when they're with their partner is when they can let their guard down and be relaxed and be rude and be whatever, when in fact they should probably reverse it. And if they're going to be that way at work, and where they're only seeing people who can leave and be kinder at home. So, yeah, I kind of want to let you lead because you have a very interesting idea of doing things. And my way of dealing with things is, again, we just bring in peace. We turn on the light and then we stop banging our shins on the table in the dark. And we have a lot of programs to do that are silent, that are, quantum infused or unified field infused, that can help in these situations, that can help people feel less stressed and everything. I know you have played one of our programs and that you enjoyed it. Do you introduce things like that to help people, or what do you feel the solution is? I know you're saying people don't need to put up with it, but are you saying that in every case that relationship needs to end, or is it savable?
It's not about save. That's a whole other matter. That's kind of an enabling kind of term. First of all, we have to know, as you agree, I know, we have to know who we are. We have to know what our values are, our vision for our life is. What are our beliefs? Not just spiritual beliefs, but our beliefs about how the world works, how relationships are best handled, how children are best raised. What are our beliefs about everything? And then what are our next steps? And if we do that work within ourselves, that can take a whole lot. I often say to people, David, when they come to me and they say, well, this is going on, and it's awful, it's terrible, and I think I'm just going to leave. I don't care if I only get out of here with the clothes on my back and the kids, I'm going to leave. And I go, whoa, please don't do that. And they say, well, why not? Well, if there's physical or sexual abuse, yes, absolutely do that. But if there isn't, why not use this to learn lessons about how to get in touch with yourself, how to empower yourself, how to have some strategies to use, either personally, like some meditation strategies, some ways of moving energy and things for yourself, but also strategies to try in the relationship, to test out, and to see where the relationship can go, to calibrate what happens when I use these more positive skills. Does it make a shift? Does it not make a shift? Does it make the other person angrier or more volatile? And you want to leave empowered. You don't want to leave with the clothes on your back and the children sitting in some room that you can barely afford, saying, oh, at least I'm out, but now what? I think if you're going to make an informed decision to leave in the very best shape possible, that you have grown, that you've expanded, that you've explored all kinds of ways of managing yourself, learning about yourself, living and demonstrating your values, and then see what happens. Now, not everybody has that luxury because they're being abused badly and they need to leave. But then the secondary part of that is, okay, I can be doing all that as a partner in that relationship, but the children may not be being treated well or seeing good models. And I have to take that into consideration as well. So there's so many factors, but certainly my number one thing to answer your question is do your own work first. Going back to the New Yorker cartoon, I really laughed when the airline started charging for extra baggage, because I saw a cartoon that says, this is going to cost you a lot if you're going to bring your emotional baggage on board. Right.
That's great.
Yeah. So, handle that emotional baggage. We all have some. And if you're accepting less than loving treatment from others, maybe you do have something that needs to be looked at. Why would that be acceptable to you? Where did it become acceptable to you? What's a way of bringing that to light and giving a name to it? How do you bring that up in the least incendiary way? How can you look at it together and see if you can make an agreement to do things differently? There are many places between go and stay.
Yeah, good. And I appreciate that. And I do wholeheartedly agree that the first thing is inner work. The first thing is to start. I love what you're saying about, the discovery of, first recognizing that this is happening, but then what is it within me that is allowing this to continue? Because we all know people that, I'm sorry, I worked for this, way back in my early 20s. I worked for this very high-level executive who, her husband had been a colonel in the military. So she was used to being treated with this level of magnitude. And I would say soft. So whenever she would yell at me, I just like, okay, fine. You want to yell, you go ahead and yell. I'm not going to take any of it on. I'm just going to let it go by. And one time when she was yelling about something, she yelled at me for not standing up for myself, which I thought was brilliant. And she said, and not only that, but when I do this, and she knew who she was. I mean, the first day we were working, she just said, she worked incredibly hard. She said, I get very tired working with the literally thousands of people that she worked with. And when I'm done, I don't have the energy to make, the guy that I was with. And she said, I don't have the energy to keep you guys happy. So I just let loose if I do, and don't worry about it. So anyway, she yelled at me for not standing up for me. So I said, fine, if that's what you want. So I started doing that. And it was very interesting because I always, and this is a hint for listeners, I always backed up. I always covered my behind. So whenever I would stand up to her, it wasn't just me emotionally. It was saying, you did this, this is how it worked out. And we traveled with her for about 6 months, and about 5 months in, I remember we were in Rhode Island at the time, and we were walking down the hall in the hotel. She was going to her room, and she was starting to just spark about something. And as she started to spark, she just started mumbling, but if I bring it up, you're going to do something and you're always right. And then she just kind of wandered off to her room without saying anything.
She learned to process in your form.
I don't know, but anyway. So,
but you do bring up a good piece, David, because toxicity does find its way into the workplace so frequently. I was giving a session at the California HR conference one year, and about halfway through this session, a person put up their hand and said, "What happens to hijackals in the workplace?" And I said, "Brace yourself." And everybody kind of came to attention. I said, they get promoted, whether it's laterally or vertically. Someone just wants rid of them, so they send them on to become someone else's problem. So, it's not surprising to have somebody who's very entrepreneurial or very much in a leadership role and having an edge to them that falls into this category. But they can slip over into toxic, and that can be very damaging.
So let's talk about exactly how you came up with the concept of a hijackal, and where did that come from? And
yeah, well, where it came from was that I noticed that people were going off to Google and they were saying, my partner does this, or my mother or father does this. And they forgot that Google is an index, it's not a psychological professional. So when Google comes back with things about narcissist or psychopath or any of those things, they go, oh, I'm with this person with this diagnosis. And no, can't diagnose a person, and don't separate yourself from the person in that way to say, oh, well, that person has a problem. You're in the relationship, honey. You're there. So you have a problem too. So I wanted to use something that was very generic, that we could have a name that would talk about behaviors, that would talk about situations that did not require a clinical diagnosis that people were incapable of making, and could say, all right, this is how it feels. This is what happens. These are the dynamics. Let's consider it from that point of view rather than from a pathology. So that's when I trademarked the term hijackals.
So is it in Wikipedia or not?
I honestly don't know.
Oh.
But the definition I gave it is a hijackal is a person who hijacks a relationship for their own purposes and then relentlessly scavenges it for power, status, and control.
Well, that's a pretty good term. Be nice to not have any anymore. Be nice to just end them in the world by helping them or helping again, we believe that a lot of people are just reacting to stress and tension and, as you say, bad examples growing up maybe. We all know people whose parents were a particular way, and then as a child, they feel that that's what the definition of a good relationship is, because their parents stay together for 50 years, but they scream at each other constantly. So they feel that if you're not in a good argument, you don't love each other. Which is not ideal, shall we say.
Well, children have no comparisons. I mean, the one that they grow up in is the only one they know. And it often doesn't happen until the teens that they get to observe by visiting other people's families that things are different over at that other house. Oh, maybe I like that model better. Maybe there are other ways to do this. But the things that get installed in us, what we learned from brain research, the things that get installed in us before the development at 6, 7, 8 of parietal and prefrontal lobe development, until then, that's where we retreat to when we get into anxiety. That's where we revert to. So it's important for us to have a good examination of what was going on in my life at that time. And, from birth to, say, 7 or 8, what was actually going on? What was I taking in? I was a sponge. I was just a sack of emotional nerve endings, if you like. What did I take in? What model did I accept? What did I think the world was like? What do I expect of the world? If you go back and think about that, I mean, if there were traumas, if there was abuse, if there were just maybe various things that couldn't be helped, maybe a lot of moving around or a lot of things that occurred that, you can rethink them when you're an adult. But you have to go back and retrieve them and be willing to do the work. A lot of what I do with people, and I have clients all over the world because I work by video, is to say, okay, let's go back and find out what was really going on then. What were you taking in? What were you seeing? What were you hearing? What did you hear? What did you see before you had language? How do you remember feeling? What are the first feelings that you had? Because that tells you what you were thinking about what your place is in the world and whether you had value. My friend Gary Salyer, Dr. Gary Salyer, he always says that you want to have been welcomed by joy.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
And if you look back and you find you weren't welcomed by joy, maybe some parent said to you, we didn't plan you. You just came along and we weren't too happy with that. Or, I thought of having an abortion, but, then we decided not. If you start hearing those things when you don't have the ability to have cognitive understanding of those concepts, my mom used to say to me, I come from a family, I'm an only child, yay, of 2 hijackals. And my mom used to say to me regularly, it's a good thing you're smart, young lady, because you're fat and ugly. And, you take that in and you You know, that's what's coming in. Like, I'm not good enough. My mother doesn't like me. I'm fat. I'm unattractive. I'm this or that, you know, and you take that in. And, you know, after she passed, David, I own a big retreat center, yoga retreat center where I had my practice. And I took all her photographs and all my photographs and put them all over the yoga room floor. And it was huge, 1,100 square feet. And I made albums for my 3 children. And after I was finished, I thought, I should go back and look for evidence of fat and ugly. Now, bear in mind, I might be delusional, but I didn't find it. And I thought, isn't that interesting? So let me extrapolate. So here's an example that maybe people would relate to. I'm sitting there and it's getting a little bit dark and I have skylights and everything in this beautiful country setting. And it's kind of closing in on me and I'm realizing, okay, 3 days before my mom died, I put my hand on hers because heaven forbid she would ever hold mine. And I said, you know, Mom, you've never told me that you love me. And she looked. She was lying in her bed. She looked at me and she said, oh, I know. Okay, so
I'm sorry for laughing, but I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sitting on the yoga room floor. My mom's passed. I'm going through all these photographs and I'm thinking, what was that? Why did I ask that question? I didn't like anything about my mother. She was racist. She was ugly. She was unfair. She was merciless. She was ruthless. She was nasty. She was cold, demanding, competitive, all those things. And then it dawned on me, David, there was a piece of me that was waiting for her approval. And then, ta-da, the lights went on. I was waiting for the approval of someone of whom I didn't approve. Big moment.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, I was speaking all over the world, and I started telling that story, and people are coming up to me and saying, oh, I just realized that's what I do. So if you have that in your past somewhere, you know, that's a good thing to uncover.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that story. And I know a lot of healers in the realm that I hang out with, and so many of them feel that most of the stuff you need to clear, you got by the time you were 2 and in the womb, and all of the patterns and all of the worries. And I know I had very interesting dynamics with my parents. They divorced and married each other 3 times.
Wow.
There were many days over the period of years where we had no idea if either parent would be there when we got home or who it was. They each left separately more than once. One time my mother just decided she couldn't deal with the relationship of being married. Now, I really want to appreciate this because while she was alive, I totally had compassion for her. First of all, she had PMS in a world where there were no female gynecologists at that point, that she was suicidal. She actually ended up in the psychiatric hospital twice because of attempted suicide. And she was going through absolute worst thing that anybody could do with PTSD. PMS, and going to doctors who were telling her that it was all in her head, which is a horrible thing. And she was going through this month after month after month. And as a kid, I didn't understand that. But once I started to, it was like, okay, I get that, you know. But she also had some gifts and would, some gifts and would know things and see things. And she had no idea what was going on. She felt that if some harm happened to somebody that she was upset with, even if it was far away, that she was the cause of it. She went through 7 religions before she married my father. She was a hugely active civil rights activist. She went all over the place. Every time there was a march on Washington or somewhere for civil rights or for ending the Vietnam War, she was there. She would keep us out of school. So, you know, on one level, she's this hugely compassionate and immensely intelligent woman. And then on the other hand, you know, we literally would come home and we would never know whether we were going to meet the sane, loving person or the absolutely crazy, bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. And when we're talking, I'm realizing some of the things that were said over and over and over again. And one of the things that she used to say was, who gave you permission, or who told you you could do this? And that went on for years. And at one point, early teens, I want to say, maybe 11, maybe 13 or something, she said that. And I looked over at her and I realized that you're a human being. You're not a god or some divine authority. You're just a human being. I'm a human being. And when she said that, she said, who do you think you are? I said, well, who do I have to be to make the decision that I can make a peanut butter sandwich or eat this? But it's an interesting thing. And what I found fascinating was after she passed, so her whole life, I'm very generous with her. I'm doing a lot of healing work for her. She did amazing the last 7 years of her life. I mean, absolutely amazing. I thought it was going to take her 50 lifetimes to get to where she got in 7 years. So really devoted, really good. At one point, she apologized to me for trying to run my life, which was great. While she was passing, my sister spent a lot of time with her. Very contentious relationship their entire life. And she said for the last 6 months, everything fell away but the love. So that was very sweet. But what I found interesting was about a month after she died, I started being furious with her. And I still work on that. And that was, I don't know, 5-10 years. I don't know what it is now, but a number of years. But I just think that's interesting. I don't know what that means. Anyway.
Well, we have a couple of similarities because my mom, she had, again, a gynecological incident where she didn't want children, and she made that very clear. So the only reason that I existed was my father wanted a child. That was the story. And my godparents wanted a child because they were in their mid-50s. And so she appeased them. She had me. But she got pregnant 2 years later. And that's when everything went sideways because she was just a mess. She was not going to have that baby. She was not going to have that baby. And so we lived in a small town, and somehow my mother, at 6 months pregnant, convinced the doctor that if she had a hysterectomy, and he said if she had a hysterectomy, he would give her a hysterectomy. And so my father was sitting there waiting for the surgery to be over, and the nurse came out and said, I hope you're happy you killed your son. And my mother ended up spending 18 months in a mental institution, and she had electroshock therapy. So I have all kinds of compassion for that. And the beginnings of the difficulties in her life and all of those things. But every one of us has choice. And when people ask me, well, do narcissists and psychopaths and sociopaths have choice? Well, yes, they do, because they don't behave the same way everywhere. They choose how to behave, which piece of bread to butter, right?
Right.
And so back to your point about coming home and letting your hair down, I always tell people, why is it that the people you say you love the most, you treat the poorest?
Yeah.
Ask yourself the question, am I treating my partner, my children, with the same, even just civility, as I would the checkout person in the grocery store?
Yes, exactly.
And if the answer is no, then check, what's going on? Why do I have, as you so wisely said, because I agree with you, why do I have this paradigm flipped? Because my focus should be on those I love the most, giving them the best of myself. And I think we have a cultural thing that says at home is where you, quote unquote, let your hair down. In other words, you wouldn't put your feet on anybody else's coffee table, but you can at home. There's things that you can do at home, and of course there are, but the way we treat people is flipped. And that's something really worth a good look, because it's just so important to recognize that we may have some patterns that are not quite as conscious as they need to be. And a big thing to do if we don't think, if after we flip that and we ask ourselves, am I as loving at home as I am civil out in the community? And if the answer is no, then you can change that. But if you happen to be a hijackal, you're not likely to change that because you're not interested. It's all about me.com. You know, it's, a hijackal is all about themselves. They're entitled. They want what they want. They should be first. They should matter more. They should be able to discard. You know, I do a lot of graphics. I have a lot of Facebook pages, and one of them is at facebook.com/hijackals. And I put a lot of memes up there, graphics. And one I put up not too long ago, and it said, you know, hijackals demand loyalty, but they very seldom give it. Yeah. And it's something that we need to notice. You know, they will demand it. What? You know, are you not going to support me? Why not? You know, I absolutely demand that you be on my side. But they'll throw you under the bus in a heartbeat to get something they want. They don't care. Now, those are extreme, but if you notice there's a tendency in that direction, you want to be having a conversation about that.
So, thank you for sharing that. I have this vision, which I've had most of my life, of a utopian world where everything is amazing. And I think we're headed to that, which means that I think when we look at this situation where there's a hijackal and someone else, that everybody can be saved, because I tend to be very optimistic. Now, what that looks like and how that plays out remains to be seen. So on one hand, the first thing that we're talking about, and what you're bringing to the table, is let's get the person who's being hijackaled to love themselves, forgive themselves, recognize what's going on in the situation, take care of themselves. But at the same time, and I, yes, totally support that. I think that's huge and crucial, and that's where I would start too. But on the other hand, I'm also looking and saying, well, is the hijackal fixable? Is, you know, some of them, I'm assuming there's gradations of hijackals, and there's some that are, you know, so far over the top that only their death will appease the world, you know. And then I think that there's some that if they understood what was going on, that again, because of what they grew up with, they don't recognize that they're doing something wrong. There's a character, I don't know if you saw, there's a TV show that ended called The Good Place. And there's a character in that who doesn't have a clue that he's not a nice person, and he's not a nice person. And they work on him, and they just get a fraction of a little bit of development of him over some long period of time. And then he's out, he doesn't show up for the next year or whatever it is in the show. And he only shows up thousands and thousands and thousands of lifetimes later, and he's arguing with somebody, and the only line that he says, and you don't see him, it's off stage, you just hear his voice, and he just says, but if you tell a girl, if you tell a woman that she looks prettier when she smiles because she does, aren't you helping her? And it's like you just get that this guy has moved, like, so, the needle has so barely moved over thousands of lifetimes for this guy. But I notice with your eyes and the way that you're looking, you're not big on wanting to heal the hijackals. Is that?
Oh, it's not about me not wanting to heal the hijackal, but, you know, it reminds me of a joke, an old joke. How many psychotherapists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to really want to change.
Yeah. So
now the thing with the hijackal is that they're so superior. And yes, there are gradations, and I'll answer that in a second, but generally, well-developed hijackal is so superior, so entitled, so all about me.com, that they're so fragile, David. I mean, the actual psychological basis of this is they're so fragile that they cannot bear the idea of even They couldn't entertain the idea of failure. They couldn't entertain the idea of making a mistake. They couldn't entertain the idea of shame. So it goes out from them all the time to keep their armor up. Well, you can't get through that. If somebody is constantly like pushing you away, there isn't a way. Someone has to say, okay, let's talk about that for a minute. I got a little bit of space here that maybe I could consider something. So the gradations of it are that some people, and this is why I work with a couple will come and maybe one of the people will contact me and they will say, I think I'm with a hijackal. And I'll say, well, are they open to coming together with you? And let's find out what's going on. And the reason for that is that if a person was raised by a hijackal, they may be like the hijackal, but they may have what we call hijackal fleas. They've only learned to do things one way, and that's not who they really are, but they don't know another way. And so sometimes you can find that out. But there is when you look at narcissists, for instance, in the literature, you'll find that there are overt malignant narcissists and there are covert narcissists. Now, a covert narcissist or a covert hijackal, that's kind of hard to determine because they are very much the victim. Instead of being the predator that you can identify with the overbearing nature, they tend to be the victim. Nobody ever loves me. Nobody understands me. Nobody ever lets me do anything. I'm never able to get ahead. And there you go again, making me wrong. And, they're very hard to identify. So those ones, we have to figure out, are they in fact covert hijackals, or are they people who need another skill set and would be very happy to have one because they'd feel better, and find out whether that's possible. So that's why I may have been looking askance is, first of all, they have to be open to the possibility there might be another way and they may be part of the problem. And secondarily, then when they do come, we have to find out whether or not that's the only way they know to cope and they want to keep it, or is the only way they know how to cope and they're quite open to another one. And I have to say, in all honesty, we're going to see less than 5% of the people in the category that want to change.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I am very aware that there are some people who are infinitely inflexible because they view the world a very particular way, and they can't handle, for the sake of sanity, they feel it has to be this way. You see, OCD people who they just, there's characters in TV that are famously, we see them when we're watching it as comedic or with great compassion, but they're so rigid in the way the world has to be because they lack inner stability or whatever it is. So I totally get that. I get that there are people who don't see other possibilities, but there's a quote that used to be on a TM poster in the 1970s that I love, and we talked about it a little bit before. The quote was from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. He started the TM program, and it said, "Everyone is one's own responsibility. Choose what you want to be." Which, when I first read it, when I was 19 or 20 or whatever it was, I thought that meant, did I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a fireman, or whatever. And obviously, as we grew, we start to realize that, who do I want to be in this situation? What do I want to experience? Is actually the highest level of empowerment that one can get, because in every situation we get to make a choice consciously instead of reacting and responding just because this is what we were shown, this is the way it's always been done. But you're absolutely right. People have to be willing to, break out of their shell, break out of, be willing to believe that the world may not be what their perception of it is, or that the responses to what they say are what they think those responses are. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is very empowering when you come to that point of view. There's a spiritual book that a particular line that stuck with me, and it said, "Who's ever most sane at the moment is responsible for the relationship." So if someone has gone into fear or doubt or upset or anger and whatever, and you're observing it, then you can be the one that you were describing yourself as compassionate in that moment and realize not your circus, not your monkeys, right? You don't have to jump in. But it does then give us that sense of responsibility. Well, I'm choosing how I see this, how I'm, everything has the meaning that I give it. And so then I will react to the meaning that I give it. And I have a lot of opportunity to see things differently. And speaking of the Maharishi, I remember in 1963 or 4, I don't remember which year, but I remember when he first came to the West, and I was sitting in a college auditorium that I expected to be full because I started practicing yoga when I was 19. And I expected it to be full. And here came in the Maharishi, big room, and there were 15 of us. And we got to spend time with him and really meet him at the very beginning of him coming to the West. And that was quite a moment for someone who was 20 years old.
I can imagine it would be, yeah. So, but a lot of the things that I learned from him, having been a TM teacher way back when. And then on faculty at the university in Iowa, in Fairfield, Iowa, which is where I got my degrees, and learned all about physics and quantum and all of that stuff. So that was kind of fun. I want to get back to this idea of whoever is the most sane gets to control, because one of the things that I noticed in my family, and among other wonderful qualities that my mother had, she was 100% Italian. And all of the stereotypical things were embodied between her and my two sisters, who were all, I don't want to use the word drama queens because that doesn't come close to what they were. So, but it got to be very interesting dynamics growing up. And one of the things that I noticed is so often somebody would scream, why are you getting so upset? They're completely losing it and yelling at you for not keeping cool about it. And that happened over and over again, not only in my family, but also other situations. And I remember thinking, that's not who I want to be. That's not how I want to handle the situation. And I spent most of my teen years just going when they were crazy, I would go in my room, I listened to music, I loved music, worked in a record store, that was my teen thing. And I would go in within, 15, 20 minutes, I'd be in a great mood, and I'd come out, maybe a few hours later, and they'd still be going through this whole big thing. And I would be like, what's the matter with you people? You had so many choices. You're doing this for 3 hours. And meanwhile, I've been in my room, reading Lord of the Rings and listening to music and having the best time ever. And I'd come out and they're still fighting. I was just like, why are you choosing to do this?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when people are dynamic and volatile, which I would use to describe the situation with your sisters, they do not want you to be calm. They feel that is it is a criticism of their volatility and dynamism at that moment. And so when you're calm, it's like, no, you just don't get it. Get into this with us. And, one of the little things that I teach my people to do when you're in that situation, particularly in one-on-one relationship that you would like to improve, and somebody else goes a bit off like a Roman candle, the best thing to do is to match their energy, their intensity, their volume, and their pace. And then slowly, it's an NLP thing, but slowly then become more calm yourself, and they will follow you in that energetic movement. And we don't know that when we're young and we have volatile sisters. But, I remember I would withdraw because my parents would just go at it. And of course, what they loved to do is I was the center stone. They would both focus on me and send messages to one another, or else they'd be fighting with each other. And I would withdraw because I was a musician. And so I had a piano in my bedroom. And so I would withdraw and go play. And so, when you have a hijackal parent, one of the things that I write about a lot, David, is that when you have a hijackal parent, the only way that you have validation from that parent is one of three things. And that's why they have children. So you'll agree with them, you'll serve them, or you'll make them look good. And if you will do one of those three things, or preferably all three at all times, you'll be in their good books. And so I didn't realize that I intuitively understood that if I went and played the piano, they couldn't complain because that's how I made them look good. And so if I went and played the piano, they would kind of calm down and they couldn't tell me to stop. Now, I have to admit that as a teenager, I used that in quite a retributive fashion because I would come home at midnight and decide to practice, because they were so annoying. But it's just something that we energetically have to learn to respond to. And as we develop some insights and some skills, we can do that in better ways. So, we'll go back to our earlier conversation about, do all the learning you possibly can when you realize you're in a relationship with a hijackal. Learn about yourself, learn about communication, learn about conflict management, learn about boundaries, learn about things to test out and to put in place and see what happens, I often use this analogy of, have you ever thrown a pot? You ever made a pot of clay?
Have I? No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's an interesting process because first of all, you work the clay, and then when you get a ball of clay, because it's not, it doesn't come the way nice and soft and pliable. So you work it, and then you sit down at the wheel and you throw it onto the centerpiece, right? So bam. And then here's the interesting thing. Once you get it going, once you start the wheel and you're using your hands to shape it, as it gets bigger, you can just take the tiniest little bit of motion and you can make it go way over here and you can bring it way over here. Now that's the way it is in a relationship once you understand it. You can make it go completely sideways or you can bring it back to the center. And then when you find that you can't do that because the other person will not have that hallmark of healthy relationships with you, that's when you have to begin to realize this may not work. Like, I happen to know the number. So it's episode 115 of the Save Your Sanity podcast. Someone asked me if I'd done a podcast on the 3 hallmarks of a healthy adult relationship, and I hadn't. So I did it. And those 3 hallmarks, if you don't have these 3 things, then you need to either be willing to work on them or recognize they're not possible. You're not going to be able to develop the relationship in a healthy way. And what they are equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. And if you don't have those things, you don't have anything, whether that's a relationship with your parent, a relationship with your adult child, relationship with your partner, relationship with your sibling, with your employer, with the person in the next room, that if you have a meaningful relationship beyond, hello, how are you? And you want to develop depth to it, you have to have those 3 things. And those things are not available to you in a relationship with a true hijackal.
So that makes sense. And there are a number of stories that I would love to share with you. I'm thinking that we don't have time, so I won't get to tell you about how my grandmother. All right, I'm going to tell you this real quick. When her second marriage was to a very traditional. So this is again in the 40s. Whatever it was, and very traditional male. He was vice president of a bank, so no wife of his was going to work. So she had a hair salon, a beauty shop, which was her favorite thing ever because she got to spend all day chatting with all these people that she loved, and they loved her because she made them look good. And so he made her close that, which I think kind of ruined her life, but I was 4 at the time, so I don't know what's going on. But she also had long hair, and he insisted that she never cut her hair but she wanted to have short hair. So what she did was every month for 18 months, she cut 1 inch off her hair. And he, after it was finally short, he went up to her and said, I really like your hair that way. But she never confronted him by saying, I'm just going to, cut it off and stuff. So there's another thing about this, those 3 pillars again. Could you name them again?
Equality, reciprocity, and mutuality.
Yeah. So you mentioned employer, and I was working for a marketing company with annuities and everything, and I had gotten the job, and they wanted us to get some licenses, insurance licenses, and NASD licenses and stuff. And so I had done all of this stuff right away, and I worked overtime without being concerned about it for whatever it was, about 6 months or something. And when I had been hired, he had promised, I had another job offer at the same time, and he didn't negotiate, but he said, what I will do is in 6 months, I'll do a review. And so 6 months came, and not only had he not done a review, but he just made the announcement that he's going to be gone for the next 6 weeks or something, which means that's 2 months that if I was going to get a raise, I'm not going to get a raise. And I was very easily intimidated at that time for a lot of reasons. But I felt that I had to say something to him. And so I made an appointment, and I went in, and I just said, I have to question my relationship with the company because you asked me to do all these things. And I was the only one who got all 3 licenses in the department of about 40 people. And I'd done all this other stuff. And I said, so I did everything that you asked of me, but now when it's time for you guys to step forward, which is to give me the review when you promised it, you're not doing it. So I kind of want to know what's going on. And he was hugely apologetic, sent out a memo. He still had to leave right away. He sent out a memo the next day to everybody that he had dropped, admitting that he had dropped the ball, and he would get to it the first time as soon as he could when he got back. But it was a very interesting thing because he had no clue that he had done that until I brought it up to him.
And that's very common, but the thing is, hijackals do that kind of thing on purpose.
Yeah.
So you were calibrating whether or not this was done just as something that had slipped his mind, or whether or not he was doing it on purpose to get, free labor from you at a higher credentialed value, and was ignoring you and hoping that you wouldn't ask, And those are the kinds of things that we have to calibrate. And we can only do that if we ask questions and have conversations.
Yeah, and that was exactly my point, because you're exactly right. I had no idea what he was going to say, because he could have effectively, he was a polite man, so I don't think he would have used the words, screw you, but he could have said, yeah, I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. But he didn't. He kind of lived up to my expectation of who he was. And, I ended up working for them for several more years. But had he handled it differently, I would have been out of there, because I don't want to work in that kind of environment, which is, again, coming back full circle to how much of it, how do we want to be, how much do we want to work with the relationship? There's 2 more things I want to mention. One is meditation. And that is, if you can get your hijackal other to at least try something like TM or some of these meditations, a lot of times they start shifting without realizing that they're shifting, which is a wonderful way to do it. So many people, when I was a teacher and with friends who are currently teachers, someone will come in and they'll learn meditation, and they'll come back after 3 months and we'll say, well, how are you doing? And they say, well, I'm not really noticing any benefits, but everybody at work is nicer, and my wife is nicer, and my kids are nicer, and things are working out, but I'm not noticing anything. So I just want to give a shout out to that. And the other thing is, how do people contact you? What do you want to do? If they're interested in following this up, which I encourage them to do, because I think this is a problem that we can solve.
Sure. I have a free ebook for everyone. If you're wondering if you're with a hijackal, I have a free ebook for you. It's called How to Spot a Hijackal, and you get it by going to hijackals.com, and you spell that hijack, ALS.com. And if you want to know more about me and my subscription series and how to become a member and get, wonderful things every week, everything about me is at my website, FOR Relationship Help, HELP.com. And that also is the name of my YouTube channel, For Relationship Help. So there's a lot available. I do 2 podcasts a week at SaveYourSanityPodcast.com. It's also on my website, For Relationship Help. So there's tons of things. There are lots of free resources. There are many ways that you can work with me or be part of a group or be part of my subscription membership process. Lots of ways to interact so that you don't have to do it alone.
And again, we have the Peace and Harmony programs, which you can download and play, which are quantum infused, unified field infused, silent programs that help just generate peace and harmony around you. And there are many stories of arguments being stopped just because somebody turned it on in the background over and over and over again. And there's a free sample again at peaceandharmonyco.com. Or you can get one of the really big systems and be a hero and blast your whole neighborhood with harmony. Rhoberta, I love talking to you. I would love to go on for much longer, and maybe we can talk again sometime. But one of the things that I love are both you and I see a better world where love dominates. And I just think that's, it starts with loving yourself and then empowering yourself, recognizing what's going on around you. And again, as we both said, the choice is yours. How do you want to be? Who do you want to be? What do you want to experience? And recognize that and love and respect yourself enough to stand up and get what you deserve.
Absolutely. And I concur. It all begins with you.
So thank you so much. And come next time, if you like this episode, be sure to give it a 5-star review, subscribe to Here We Come to Save the Day, and have a great day, life, week, year, everything. Thank you again, Rhoberta.
Thank you, David. Take care.
Thank you for listening to another helpful, fun, and life-changing episode of Here We Come to Save the Day with David Adelson. To access the show notes and additional resources, go to herewecometosavetheday.com. If you've enjoyed the show and find it helpful and fun, please leave us a review and share with a friend. Tell us issues troubling you or questions you have. We're here to help you. That's what Here We Come to Save the Day is all about. Till next time.